Trauma at its core is the experience, the anticipation, or the reality of our life being in danger. Now, in a complex social environment, our life is often more in danger if we cross certain social taboos. I mean, it may be the most absurd thing in the world to go to prison for smoking marijuana, but if you're in a cult that is afraid of altered states of consciousness and responds to that fear not with education, science, and intelligence, but with fear and anxiety, it doesn't matter what's right or what's wrong, what's intelligent. The fact is, you could die in prison. Your life expectancy goes down in prison. And it is a traumatic event to experience a violation of certain cult taboos. Similarly, in our hierarchy of human needs, survival, security, love, and belonging, in a very complex culture where we are very interdependent, our survival and security is in many ways determined more by our human relationships than it is by our physical brawn. For example, in today's world, if you could choose to be Mr. Universe in a shame-based, abandoned, place where everyone hates you, or could be a cripple surrounded by 500 people who would go out of their way to make your life better, the odds of your survival might be better as a cripple in a well-connected, well-supported social network. And what this means is that when we are ostracized, are partitioned, are excluded, we may be aware of a feeling of trauma or threat that is greater than if we narrowly get hit by a bus and has more of a sense of doom around it. Now, trauma is a perceived or actual threat to our financial existence, our social existence, our physical existence, our emotional existence, our mental sanity and existence. So any part of us that we identify with, if it is threatened with a sense of obliteration, we activate the chemicals around trauma. And when not attended to and attuned to and responded to, these can become PTSD. Now, what I want to focus on in this video is the phenomena of scale, or the law of mass. The law of mass says that when a finger makes contact with a hand, when a pinball makes contact with a bowling ball, the bowling ball always wins. Roll a pinball this way, roll a bowling ball this way, they collide. The pinball goes scattering, and the bowling ball continues with 99% of its original momentum intact, just ever so slightly slowed down by the impact of the pinball. And why is this important? Well, two bowling balls coming together stop. And while obviously they challenge each other's momentum, you don't have, the scattering dynamic as you do with the pinball and the bowling ball. And if you're the bowling ball and you encounter a pinball, are you going to be traumatized because 1% of your momentum was slowed down? Of course not. And what I'm getting at is that interactions that happen in which you are the big one and interactions that happen in which you are the small one relate completely different within the biology of trauma. Some people get nervous anytime they're encountering a police officer because of the differential of power, because what's associated with the police officer is I could say this, or I could do this, or they could do this, or they could plant some marijuana in my car, and I could be in jail by the end of this transaction. And that's a traumatic circumstance, particularly when you're in a shame-based cult. If you're in a shame-based cult where if you're in jail, jail is seemed like a shameful thing, you could lose your job. So there's a slippery slope in shame-based abuse cults where a police officer could abuse their power and put you in jail. Sandra Bland was a great example of that in the Malcolm Gladwell book. She moves out of the way of a police officer because he's accelerating too fast behind her, and then he pulls her over for moving out of his way without turning on her indicators. Then he breaks the law by insisting that she stop smoking in her own car, interrogates her for who knows how long, then hauls her off in jail after traumatizing her and humiliating her, and then she commits suicide because it's just one too many burdens to deal with. When a police officer comes up behind you and you get out of their way, they then pull you over it's just too much to deal with. So a police officer, you've got this dynamic where you can't arrest the police officer. You can't take them to task for being a fucking asshole if they choose to be a fucking asshole. But they can. If you choose to be a fucking asshole, you resisted arrest, you did this, they can throw the riot book at you, and before you know, you've got 10 different charges, all because you're in an irritable mood, but not the police officer. And so you've got these different power dynamics. Same with a child and a parent. The parent wants to break the family rule and eat the dessert and have a midnight feast and have the ice cream. You can't dress your parent down. You can't say, what a hypocrite. Last month I got up at 1 a.m. and had 1 scoop of ice cream, and I was, I was denied ability to go to my friend. I was made to feel like a complete schmuck for 3 days. You denied me my dessert, and here you are doing the same fucking thing. And because I caught you, and you don't like being caught, you glare at me and send me to my room as if I've done something wrong for noticing your hypocrisy. And if I bring that up, I'll be accused of sassing and maybe given a slap. And so you've got these very different scales. And what I mean at essence is that the smaller we are as either a physical mass or as a perceived inner state, the bigger everything else is. By contrast, the smaller we feel, the smaller we identify as being, the bigger we project the size of the rest of the world. For a 2-year-old taking a swim in the ocean with 1-foot waves, relatively fun and pleasant for an adult, it is a traumatic event. If a 2-year-old falls into a 2-foot pool with no waves and can't swim, it is a traumatic event. If an adult steps into the pool, there might be peals of laughter. What's the difference? The difference is you're bigger. Now, we get this with physicality, but what we don't get in an emotionally and psychologically illiterate culture is that our inner state is changing all the time in response to triggers, in response to past association, in response to past traumas that have not been resolved. Our inner state often has nothing to do with our outer body. I would say I've spent 40% of my life feeling 2 to 6 years old emotionally. Not 100%. It's not like this interferes with my brain. But my physiology, my body, as I'm anticipating certain events, is not the body and physiology of a confident 6'1" male. It's the physiology and the body of a 2 to 6 year old male, expecting to be hit, expecting to be shamed and humiliated in some way. And there's a gap between my body's age and the felt experiential age with which I'm dealing with reality. A gap that is associated with arrested development, which is associated with shock and trauma that does not get repaired at a young age, which freezes the age at in a dissociated state, so that it never comes back, fully integrates into the body, and realizes it's older, or that life has moved on past the event. It's still dealing with reality at that young age. Now, what this means is that when those young ages are present and triggered in me or in you, that I'm dealing with the reality through the eyes emotionally of a 2-year-old, of a 3-year-old, of a 6-year-old. And so the reality that I'm looking at seems much bigger than how it would seem if I was dealing with it as a competent and confident adult. Because a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old should not have to deal with those faces of reality. But I'm dealing with that because we're in a culture that does not make the distinction or honor the reality of the inner age, the inner emotional age. You could be 80 years old but feeling like you're 3. And there's no place in our cult to note that down as part of the interaction so that I would be sensitive to you the same way that I would if you actually were 3 years old, because that's how you're feeling in that moment. Okay, so the smaller you feel and identify as being, the bigger everything else is. And the bigger the discrepancy in scale between you and something else in a dynamic of tension, the more traumatic it is. If you're having a battle with a mountain, who do you think is going to win, you or the mountain? If you put your hands up to stop a Humvee coming at you at 100 miles an hour, who's going to win? Are you going to confidently knock the Humvee out of the way? Or is it going to sail right through your body without barely scratching the occupants inside, other than cleaning your blood off the windshield? And this is the phenomena of scales. So understanding that, it's important to understand that the feeling of smallness, which I would say is an epidemic, that there's a feeling of smallness, a feeling of insignificance, a feeling at times of impotence, of helplessness, of insignificance in our cult, that we breed children in grown-up bodies who feel incredibly small. And because they feel small, because we feel small, every little detail becomes a big deal the way it would be for a 2-year-old. The waitress didn't smile at us when we gave her a tip. What does that mean? We said I love you to our partner and they just said, Does this mean we're not loved? Does this mean we're going to be all alone and lonely forever? Does this mean we won't have a parent to take care of us? That's how a 2-year-old, that's how a 5-year-old deals with this information. Mom's angry. Mom didn't care about our affection. Now, we can show our stupidity and our ignorance by laughing at this all we want, by humiliating the regressed 2-year-old. And of course, we are a sociopathic cult, so that's exactly what we do often. But it's important to understand that the pettiness of our world comes not because we are not innately big. I would venture to say that all of us are born enormous. We're born knowing our value. We're born with healthy reflexes to say yes and to say no, and our possibility field is huge at birth. If you take the average infant and put it into an exceptionally intelligent, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, psychologically household, or community or culture, that child can learn any language. It can learn any set of different skills within the physical. The possibility field is huge for that infant. And the cult systematically reduces that possibility field to a relatively small probability field. Now, we may say, it's a very big probability field. They could watch this movie, or they could watch this movie, or they could smoke this brand of cigarettes, or that brand of cigarettes, or drink this beer, or this beer. It's incredibly small probability field relative to the possibility field of the species, what we are capable of with an intelligent map. And this diminishment, this process of being made to feel small, diminished, insignificant, lacking in value, worthless, hopeless, helpless, this process is a far cry from the self-worth, the self-respect, the integrity and integration of the expression of a newly born child. They're angry, they kick, they are hungry, they scream, they move around. They have incredible energy. You don't see a 2-year-old with chronic fatigue, depressed, doesn't know, can't get out of bed. No. They've got way more energy per square inch than you or I do. And they've got more the possibility field. It's just incredible. Any culture on the planet they can adopt to, any language, and so they're really limited to us and the protocol that we've set up to greet the infant. And so putting ourselves into the position of the infant and asking the question, how is it that you and I feel so diminished, so small, so insignificant, have to puff ourselves up with so much grandiosity to compensate for the shame, the humiliation, the inadequacy, have to eat so much ice cream to compensate from the humiliation, that smallness inside? How is it that as grown bodies, we feel so small? And it's not an accident. And every cult tries to foist its inadequacies onto its population to hide its own inadequacies. Cults are designed to maintain a status quo, and you can't maintain a status quo and protect against uncertainty, change, volatility, and the potential trauma of change and volatility if you understand that your cult is dumb. And so every cult is dumb in some area or other and tries to pass its stupidity on to the individuals. Oh, this is a very important and sophisticated cult. Very, very, very sophisticated. You don't want to think anything about the way we're doing things. You, on the other hand, oh, we're not sure we want you. You're a pain in the butt. Why did you ruined your parents' life. You do this. You, on the other hand, completely unlovable. It's not that we have the inability to love you as an emotionally illiterate cult. No, you're unlovable. So there's this transference to protect the status quo, because as soon as you realize that the cult is fucked up, then you have to change something. And, change brings uncertainty. And in a traumatized cult, uncertainty is terrifying. Uncertainty takes you into the unknown. And once you're into the unknown, you don't know when the next trauma that you're afraid of, that you're terrified of. In a trauma, shame-based cult, your greatest terror is the next shame, the next trauma, the next shock. Where does that come from? So you need to control everything, right? You have to hyper-control. So where does that come from? It comes from the unknown. So your cult is not sane. It's not intelligent. It's certainly not kind. What it is a protection, a wall that stands between you and the great unknown. Now, the great unknown is, of course, neutral, but neutral means all of your nightmares are in the great unknown. Nightmares you haven't even thought about, they're in the unknown. But miracles, incredible synchronicities, this that had never occurred to you that's going to change your life for the better, this partner you've never met that connects with you in this way and this way, that's also in the unknown. The unknown is 99.9% of all reality. When you're in an abuse cult, you get taught, don't talk to strangers. Why? 99.9% of all people are strangers to you, but they're part of the unknown. You could learn something that changed something. Oh my goodness, well, we can't have that. We can't have foreigners teaching us how culturally illiterate we are, that there's a better way of doing things in another country that we haven't even paid attention to. We can't have that. We can't have our children coming back home and saying, why don't they have paid maternity leave like they do in Denmark? I just talked with a Danish student. They get paid $1,000 a month by their government to go to free college. Why am I racking up $100,000 in student loans? Well, we don't want to consider that our cult might be patently insane, that we might be pathologically sociopathic, saddling our teenagers and young adults with a burden of debt we wouldn't want on our worst enemies, learning useless topics that aren't even going to help them get a job. Well, we don't want to think about that. And so we don't talk to strangers. Don't explore the unknown. And so we're afraid of the unknown. We protect the cult, which does really one thing. It means we don't have to think. How you doing? I'm fine. Didn't take any thought, did it? We don't have to think. We know what we're supposed to do, however inane. There's not a lot of surprise doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing day after day. It might be a bit boring, but there's not a lot of fear of the unknown most of the time. And so that's what a cult does, is it provides that sense of certainty and with it a sense of cohesion and relaxation, because we're not going to be shocked by running through the cult routine. However, we have a diminishment-based cult. We have a cult that diminishes us in 1,000 different ways. And as it diminishes us and we feel smaller and smaller, the challenges and the problems that we face feel bigger and bigger by contrast. And as that discrepancy grows, it takes less and less threat to elicit the traumatic symptoms of our biology, the fight, flight, freeze dynamic. So I wanted to talk about how does our cult go around and go about diminishing us to the extent that it does. And it starts young. Because one of the obvious, questions every child has to figure out through all the interpretation of what's the pattern of behavior. And a child comes in thinking they're important, but soon learns the rather painful, lonely, and traumatic message that they are not important. If you were important, they would have prepared for you. Meaning, early childhood biology would be studied. Trauma would be taught in every high school. And traumatic repair. How is it that in a cult that traumatizes virtually every single one of its citizens multiple times, that we don't learn a single thing about trauma within the cult framework? Why isn't every parent required to take a traumatic literacy test prior to giving birth? Because this would suggest that you, as a child, were important. Important enough for your parents to transcend the mediocrity and stupidity of our culture to prepare for your arrival. The culture would have prepared for us in some adequate way. And when we look at the reality of infancy today, 1 in 7 Americans are substance addicts. How can a substance addict, when high or drunk or raging or whatever, binge watching, how can a substance addict attune to something 10 times smaller, an infant, or grasp what it's like as an infant to be in relationship with a giant addict who doesn't have control of their own state? If we mattered, they would have prepared for us by teaching competent parenting skills, by encouraging addicts to consider whether or not raising a child is a good idea. I'm in no way a believer that abortion has no consequences or is a good idea. But might it be better than traumatizing the shit out of an infant with a 95% chance of giving PTSD to a child because you've got 2 addicts who are mildly dissociative, periodically violent, incredibly sociopathic towards their own inner child? Might that be a condition where it would be an incredible kindness to end the life early rather than after 20 years of shame and abuse when they commit suicide or become an addict themselves, in a culture that doesn't know how to repair this? So, the mediocrity of parenting. No shadow training about the family system. No monitoring of addiction. Highly splintered families. Family shames and secrets that don't get addressed but get passed on in 100 different ways to the child. This is not a message that you and I mattered. It's often so sloppy in our culture that one parent resents having the child, the other parent wants the child but doesn't know what they're doing, and we're born into that mess. This is not a message of significance. The data on human happiness is clear. 75% of our income, 20% of our health, and 40% of our daily happiness depends on the quality and skill of our relationship to ourself and others, which is mirrored on the child-parent template. So, understanding that data and valuing you as a human being, you would think that a culture, that a family system interested in 75% of your income going up would, of course, spend 75% of your education, perhaps, on developing emotional competency, traumatic awareness, self-appreciation, regulating skills, psychological literacy, training in conflict resolution, negotiation skills, selling strategies, prevention and repair of abuse protocols, self-awareness and self-honor, and healing brutalities of our history and bringing our ignorance about, historical patterns within the culture to light, so that when the cruelty of those patterns get passed down to you, you don't take them personally and you understand where they're coming from. You'd think that would be a reasonable thing to do, given the data. But our cult does the exact opposite. You can go from cradle to grave, doing everything you are supposed to in this cult, meaning you can be born, you can be raised by your parents, you can go to school, you can go to college, you can go to church, and you can get a job without a single hour of science-based or biology-based, science-based psychological literacy, emotional literacy, trauma literacy, relationship training, romantic training, conflict management, repairing abuse, noticing traumatic symptoms and stopping them in your children. In other words, your cult will keep you completely and totally illiterate in the most vital areas of your life. Now, having accomplished this quite systematically, surprise to surprise, you will be an incompetent human being when it comes to human relationships. Relating to yourself and relating to other human beings is going to be awkward, ineffective, unreliable, frightening, traumatizing, because you do not know what you're doing in a cult that is passionate and willful in its ignorance in any domain that would allow you to know what you're doing in these areas. Now, so you will be incompetent, uncertain, hesitant, make plenty of mistakes that will be very painful, feel out of your depth, feel lonely, feel isolated, be traumatized, and traumatize other people. So welcome to the Western world. Now, having succeeded in inducing these states, your cult has another beating ready to deliver. Because within the chauvinism of Western culture, particularly as a man, you are shamed for not knowing the answer to something. So we're not going to teach you the answer to something, but then we're going to shame you and make you feel small because you don't know. And, the antithesis of that is the person that feels so sick of being made small that they become a know-it-all, meaning they pretend to know everything, just so they don't get beaten up over the head for not knowing in a cult that refuses to teach them. So rather than beating itself over the head, which would be an intelligent cult, and say, why the fuck are we so dumb that we don't teach you a goddamn thing about emotional literacy, blah, blah, blah. No, it beats you over the head. We're going to, in fact, take you out of human life scenarios. We're going to prepare you for life by removing you from life and cramming your head with absurd topics. Like, fractions. Boy, if we didn't have fractions to help us drive to work in the morning, do our jobs and such, who knows what the world would come to, or algebra, that most essential skill in life. We're going to take you out of life and cram you with sheer gibberish that has nothing to do with anything you're ever going to use for the rest of your life. Doctored history, ridiculous dates. The most meaningless part of history. Let's cram that. When was the war? When was the War of Independence? When was this one? It's like, give me a fucking break. What's the point? Are we doing any deep dives about the stupidity of these endless wars, the true costs in human life and family life? Are we even bothering to tell a meaningful history from an angle that's relevant to human beings? Who gives a shit if it was 1817 or 1820? What matters is, would we go to war again for the same reason? Of course, we're not going to discuss that because that would be intelligent. So we keep our people ignorant of the things they most need to survive and thrive, etc., but then we shame them and diminish them for not knowing. Women go around saying, I like a confident man. Well, confidence comes from successful experience. Now, exactly how successful is a man going to be going from cradle to grave without a single hour of emotional training, without even knowing the difference between an emotion and a feeling? Do you know the difference between an emotion and a feeling? What is it? I learned it a few years ago. Well, how dumb do you have to be to have, every single action in human history is motivated, is propelled into being by feelings and emotion. By feelings and emotion. So it's like gasoline. Now, if we're an entire culture based on oil, because every machine is powered by oil and electricity that comes from oil and all that, and we know nothing about oil, that's not terribly good. But it's far worse when we don't even understand the fuel that propels our actions and creates our lives. That's how dumb we are as a cult-sanctioned protocol. In fact, our cult has something ready for people who talk about their feelings. Against cult protocol, of course. Too sensitive. Too emotional. How can you be too emotional? Oh, you're too emotional. That right there, that's it. I don't want to hear about it. We shame people for having feelings, rather than understand what those feelings reveal about us and the environment that we live in. And so women shame men for not being confident, while the cult ensures complete ignorance, out of which one would expect a lot of failure, not a lot of success. So why would you get confidence? The only one confident is going to be a con artist, going to put forth the game. And that's often the level we're at this culture, is men are advised that women like confident men. So even though they haven't succeeded very much with their relationship skills because they're atrocious in a cult that doesn't teach any, they try to pretend and put on an act of how careless and confident they are, knowing absolutely nothing about themselves and other people. And of course they fall flat on their faces because their confidence is hollow. It's not based on what real confidence would be based on. If we learned, for example, attunement and traumatic repair and emotional resuscitation and healing of shame in high school, useful topics for any teenager, then by the time they were 20, they'd be able to spot a spiraling shame dynamic, a trauma going on like that. As a 20-year-old, they'd be able to go in, interrupt, gather support, pull the person out of trauma, say, there you are, and go on with complete confidence. And that confidence is sexually attractive. But you need literacy, you need training to get there. But we're not going to do that. Chauvinism is an enormous undercurrent in all of our culture. And it's much deeper than the gender chauvinism that says men are more valuable than women. And scientifically, you have to qualify that. Meaning, sure, random set of 100 guys, random set of 100 women, a man is going to throw a ball farther than a woman. So in the Stone Age, when who survives is depend by who can throw the stone farther, because if you've got a stone and there's a group of women on the other side and a group of men, see, the men can hurl the stone into the group of women and start battering them up before the group of women can hurl the stone into the men's group, because the men has longer arms. So you can say, okay, men are superior in that context, in that activity. Okay. Where are the stone battles going on? Exactly how does a longer throw help in typing or coding? It's completely irrelevant in the modern age, other than rape and things like this. It is absurd. And then women's greater skills: attunement, empathy, diffuse awareness, ecological awareness. Now, these are very vital skills in today's world. And so it's a little bit odd that we're so out of date with our chauvinism that we haven't grasped the fact that we're not really in a world today. I mean, handguns. If a woman can aim, it doesn't matter if you're Mr. Universe and want to rape some gal. She pulls out a handgun, boom. The handgun works as much in a 100-pound person as it does in a 300-pound person. Boom. It's an equalizer. So technology has taken the physical issue away. And on psychological levels, it depends on the situation. Women are traditionally better listeners. Do we need better listening in our culture, or do we need more talkers? You tell me. So chauvinism is absurd on a gender level, but it goes much deeper than gender. Chauvinism is the valuing of the yang energy or masculine energy more than the feminine energy. So what's this diminished feminine energy? Well, you say, hey, what's the answer to this? And you say, I know it, it's this. Well, that's high ranking. You know. So we value knowing more than we value not knowing. And the consequence is everyone in our cult is busy trying to pretend to know more than they actually know. Because we don't actually value the state of not knowing and then finding out, as much as we value pretending to know it already. And so here we see immediate cultural distortion from valuing knowing more than not knowing. And this starts in the classroom. The teacher asks someone a question, and the student says, "I don't know." And everyone humiliates that student for being in a feminine state of the unknown. It's pure chauvinism, and it's pure stupidity, because as soon as you shame someone for not knowing, you take all the joy and flow out of learning, but you also fail to acknowledge just how big the unknown is. Class curriculums are very nice and tidy and stay within a tiny little box. But the reality is that 99% of all information is not only unknown, it's not even known that we don't know it, because we don't know enough to know that we don't know it. The universe is vast. We are lucky if we know even 1% of all there is to know. And so the truth is, the embracing of the unknown and relating to the unknown is a far more potent survival skill and growth skill than pretending to know it all or cramming trivial pursuit questions as if you can answer a trivia game is going to prepare you for the phenomenon of being in a deep sea diving in a chasm that's no one ever been, where you run into a creature that no one's ever encountered. It's absurd. So then, of course, we have things like Toastmaster. What do you learn in Toastmasters? Now, a scientist will tell you that to communicate, you need 50% speaking and 50% listening. That if you have 100% speaking and no listening, or 100% listening and no speaking, there's no communication. And that the ideal balance is 50-50. So in an intelligent cult, you would have an ideal balance of learning to speak and learning to listen equally. In a chauvinistic cult, the talker is valued. The listener is, irrelevant, because the listener is in a feminine state, is in a receptive yin state, and so not valued. So why would we teach people how to listen? So of course we have a cult that jabbers all the time, often saying very little, and no one listens. No one listens, so we feel insignificant. We all feel diminished because none of us, in a cult that doesn't teach listening, none of us feel deeply and fully heard. Why would you? If your cult teaches people how to talk, but not how to listen, you feel diminished. Similar with an exchange of energy. You don't get an energy exchange unless you have a giving and a receiving. Giving energy and the other person blocks it, there's no exchange of energy. Open to receiving and no one's giving, there's no exchange of energy. In order for an exchange of energy, a gift, a concept, anything, electricity, to happen, you have to have a giver and a receiver. The giver is masculine, the receiver is feminine. Well, in our cult, the giver is superior and the receiver is weak. So nobody wants to be the receiver. So you have the phenomena where you give someone a gift and they resent you for creating the illusion within the cult framework that they're weak, because that's feminine to receive. And so the recipient is busy pretending that they didn't need your gift, didn't want it, that it may be even a burden, which diminishes the giver, but it also diminishes the recipient. Chauvinism diminishes everyone. Chauvinism says talking is the valuable thing, so nobody's going to learn how to listen. So when you're listening, you feel diminished. Why don't I have a chance to talk? But when you're talking, you don't feel heard, so you feel diminished as well. Chauvinism is, incredibly thick and dense in the entire practice of diminishment. Now, then there's racism, capitalism, and ageism. Now, your skin color and where you're born, as far as we know, is completely random. I mean, do you take credit? Did you have a tutorial in the pre-world and said, I'm going to be born a white male in the United States because that's a better kind of human being than a brown female in Mexico or something else. And it's a meritocracy. I'm going to work very hard. I'm going to get an A+ in superiority. And as a result, I'm going to choose this. And I'm the only one that got in. It's like Yale. If you're a really superior being, you can be born as a white male in a rich country and dominate other women. And, of course, everyone doesn't get into Yale. Their grades aren't good enough. I mean, what's the basis? It's a complete joke. You don't remember choosing your race. And if you did, heaven help you. If you think being in the most unintelligent, you see, intelligence is the efficiency with which energy is transformed into human well-being. Rich white people consume more energy than any other cult in human history, and they are not happier. They're fatter, very depressed, lonely, feel a sense of worthlessness, don't particularly like their job. There's nothing wonderful about spending. An American is going to generate 102 tons of garbage compared to a Native American that didn't generate 5 pounds of garbage 500 years ago on the exact same land. I mean, it's almost impossible to compute the amount of energy that is consumed per capita to live an American lifestyle. But the American that is maybe consuming 1,000 to 10,000 times more units of energy in time, money, and natural resources to create their lifestyle than the Native American is often less healthy, less vital, less integrated, has less of a sense of purpose than a 500-year-old Native American, meaning a Native American on the same land 500 years earlier, who was obliterated as a heathen while having more talent in sustainability and several other traits than almost anyone on the planet today. I mean, so racism is an absolute absurdity. You don't pick your skin color. Now, here's the diminishment of value based on skin color. So let's say you're white and in America or whatever, and so you've been brainwashed by your cult to believe that you are more valuable because you're white. I mean, what a slap in the face. It's not because of your beingness. It's not because of your talent. It's not because of your intelligence. It's not because you're healthier. It's nothing to do with you. You're more valuable because of something that has nothing to do with you. It's diminishing because it diminishes the underlying humanity. It says if I happen to have been born in, Zimbabwe or something, I would be what? Worthless? Abused, sold into slavery. I mean, it's just very, very, very shallow. I'm proud, that I lucked out and was born white. And then you have capitalism. So this is the idea that you are valuable because you have money. Now, there's a little bit more merit involved here, although let's face it, plenty of the wealthiest people around just happen to luck out into a family and be born into it. And there's a lot of luck around timing and skill sets and all that at the time. Geeks were bullied and humiliated for centuries. And then a couple of them invented Apple and Microsoft, and now they're celebrated. It's just timing. You don't pick your time. So, the sad thing with capitalism as the basis of meaning or value or significance is that money is treated as more valuable than human beings. And you can see this, and it's a very odd equation, isn't it? Human being creates money. Other human being values the money more than the human being that created the money. This is mathematically absurd. If the human being created the money, by definition, the human being is more valuable than the money they created. So it is idiocy to go after the money and ignore the human being. Sheer idiocy. It's mathematically flawed. This was supposed to be the lesson of the golden goose. You don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. You feed the goose and keep getting golden eggs. You value the goose more than any one egg is the moral of the golden goose. But that's not what we do. We routinely value human beings less than money. Why should we fix the PTSD in a veteran who comes home from Iraq beating his child? It's just a 6-year-old. Who cares if he gets beaten? We can't spend important tax money teaching a veteran how to love his children or heal PTSD. Nah. So we put money ahead of human beings. And we see this very clearly with homelessness. Homelessness induces PTSD in 42% of the people in my town, according to our local town census. And so you say, okay, so these people are in survival. They don't have security. They certainly don't have love and belonging. Self-esteem is shattered in that kind of environment. They're not developing their gifts and contributing them to the community. They're hustling around trying to avoid being hunted by the police. So we've reduced a segment of our population to less than animals because we don't even let them go in the public parks. A deer goes into the public park, fine, be my guest. A human being goes into a public park, let's call in the police and get them out of there. Why should the homeless who don't have any money have access to public land? They don't have any money. They're worthless. And why should they be treated well? We don't treat people well. We treat money well. So if any of those homeless came into $1 million tomorrow, everyone would happily sell them a home and treat them with great respect. But they're not any different, are they? What's different is the $1 million. So it's not really true in a diminishment shame cult to say that we treat human beings well. It's true to say that we treat their money well. So if you happen to be a human being that has money, lucky you, we'll treat you well. If you happen to stumble upon great misfortune, we'll treat you like shit. Great misfortune. What is great misfortune in a capitalist cult? It's not having any money. And having it really sink in. You never mattered. Only your money. Now, we don't like admitting what shits we are around that, so we may tolerate you just so that you don't make us feel guilty. But this is a very, very sick phenomenon. And then ageism, they're just a child, or they'll grow out of it and stuff. It's so horrifying, because if you can imagine today a 30-foot giant right now just stomp up to you, you worthless piece of garbage, and shake you around, and you realize this asshole could just throw you into the ground. They're 30 foot tall, weigh 2 tons. You, a mere 6 foot tall male or female, whatever, shake you around, you worthless piece of garbage. I mean, you would be traumatized out of your life. And what if that asshole of a giant's wife said, "Oh, don't worry about it. They'll grow out of it in another 50 years. No, you don't. You're scared shitless. There are giants that go around stamping on people, threatening them, shaming them, can do it at any time. We have no defense. It's absolutely terrifying. And rather than acknowledging that children need to be treated with just much more care than adults, we treat our kids like shit. Why? Because they don't have money. And we go out of our way. The same abusive parents that finish, whacking and, molesting and this and that, go out and be polite to their customers. Children are shit. Customers, king. Cash is king. It's very sick. Just a child. And we do the same with the elderly. They're old. Well, let's put them in an old people's home. Where they can do old people thing. They're not valuable. They're not contributing to the economy. We don't want them around. We have important lives to give. Let's put them in an old folks' home where they can do the process of dying without disrupting the hardworking people who are making the most money. Doesn't matter if you're happy. Doesn't matter if you're bringing happiness to other people. As long as you're making money in a capitalist cult, that has to be valued. So, of course, 3 tenets of our culture all make us as human beings feel smaller. Now we go to work. This is where we're going to finally heal all our shame, have someone listen to our deepest traumas and fears, have someone reassure our inner child, help us understand that we have an inner child, teach us emotional. No. Work is defined by professionalism. And we could have defined professionalism any way we wanted. We could have said it was professional to take care of human beings more than money. Wouldn't that be a great thing if work was defined as helping human beings, and money was simply we have to find enough resources to do that. But we're about helping human beings. And that includes helping the employee. And so how do you need help? And how do you need help? Oh my goodness, you need someone to listen to your feelings for 3 hours. Well, I'm a human being. That's my job, is to help human beings. So let me listen to you for 3 hours right now. And you go away feeling valuable because another human being wanted to see you, wanted to know you, wanted to care about you. But what do we say? Time is money. I can't talk too long. I have 5 minutes before I'll get in trouble for being a human being. Could you get over the death of your mother in 5 minutes? Because I don't have time until next week. How much shittier do you need to make the person feel than to suggest with a serious face that because professionalism is defined By what? Leaving all personal issues at home and getting the job done, which is almost never defined as making people feel delighted, present, alive, like human beings, which would be a truly amazing job to do. Instead, it's glue 20 cabinets onto, end pieces together, move 10 boxes over here. I can't honor you as a human being. I've got 10 boxes to move per minute, or I get, I lose my overtime and blah, blah, blah. And so, and we all understand. And this is perhaps one of the biggest jokes and the biggest kind of things of diminishment. We have decided that being efficient is more important than being empathic, intelligent, intimate, or human. And so a human being comes up and wants to be human with you. And we say with a straight face, "Oh, I can't stop now. It'd be inefficient." And we go along with this bullshit. Of course you can't be a human being. My goodness. Your employer would lose 20% of their net profit for that hour. My goodness, we can't have that. And of course you couldn't go off the clock and be a human being, because then you'd lose money. And we all know that making money is more important than being a human being. So you have this, it's such a joke. I'm in Thailand at the moment, and the Thai make an average of, let's say, $350 a month. Somewhere in that range, an average. And they have all the time in the world for me. They who don't have 3 televisions in every room, who don't have 3,000 square foot homes, have time to be a human being and have time to make me feel like a human being, which is why I'd rather be with a Thai person any day of the week than an American. It's why I consciously cut my business off, shut it down, lose tens of thousands of dollars a month in lost revenue, so that I can be treated like a human being for months at a time. Just whole months of being treated like a human being. In 1 month in Thailand, I will have more quality and spontaneous time with random strangers than I will in an entire year in the San Francisco Bay Area. 1,000% higher quality time. It is easier to feel at home and belonging with people who do not speak a word of English than it is with my own neighbors. It's truly incredible. And America and Western culture is proud of what? Keeping busy. You're keeping busy? You're keeping busy? Why is that the question? What about well-being? Do you feel connected and loved by other human beings? That's probably the single most valuable question. Do you love yourself and feel connected and loved with other human beings? That would be a question worth asking, except no one has ever asked me that question in my entire life, because it's relevant. We don't ask relevant questions to our humanity. There's no Fortune 400 list for the kindest people in the United States. No. Billionaires will fight, like, oh my gosh, I've got 78 billion. Buffett's got 79. Oh my goodness. Well, what can we do? I've got to be the richest. They'll fuss about that. Kindness scores, compassion, the best parents in America, the top 1,000 list perhaps? No? The most competent lovers perhaps, since we're sex obsessed? Could we have the most competent lovers In America, could we do anything about human beings rather than say who has the most piles of paper? Once it gets above 1 million or 2, it's pretty meaningless in terms of its impact on daily life, except for the cult status in a capitalist cult. So in work, leave your feelings at the door, leave your personal life at the door, and keep busy. And we almost are made to feel ashamed. If we are not working, heaven forbid, and not busy, even more terrible, and have feelings, very odd, and want to talk about them, what's wrong with you? And interrupt a busy working person who's making money? The outrage that flows of paper as one meaningless job that 78% of Americans hate gets done so another meaningless job that 78% of Americans hate can move along, and that no one feels welcome and honored as they show up with feelings and things that they want to talk about, such as move a little step closer towards traumatic literacy, this, that, and the other. And so, it's a constant message. You reach out to someone, hey, you want to get dinner today? You're such a problem. I'm busy keeping busy, right? Oh my goodness. What a burden you are that I've got playing my video games from 8 to 9, then I've got pornography 10 to midnight. Then I've got I'm gonna have to get up early the next morning, go do my job that I hate. Then let's see, I think I could squeeze you in. In fact, call me. I'm so busy and important. Call me in 2 weeks and we'll schedule something. We'll talk then. Meaning, I don't even have time to talk to you right now about making an appointment. That's how unimportant you are. But if you, since I'm way too busy, of course, to call you, since I'm too busy to talk to you, of course I could return the effort, but oh my gosh, that's so busy. And then if you will pester me again so I can go through my whole martyred routine of all the things that I don't have time for, but cram into my schedule. Where the fuck do all this shit come from? The Thai don't give me this bullshit. If they were all worried about getting ahead because some of them have tin huts, oh my gosh, if anyone was supposed to get ahead and catch up with the Joneses, it would be the Thai. They're just too intelligent. They're too busy smiling, connecting, enjoying nice. They actually have dinner with their families. In fact, they have dinner with their neighbors. In my neighborhood, they lay out blankets in the parking lot. And they all sit there for hours at a time getting to know one another every single day. And guess what? They don't feel diminished. It's incredible to watch the dignity of a people who don't apologize for existing, for having feelings, and for connecting with other people. It's beautiful. It's worth every penny. Costs me $100,000 a year sometimes to spend 2 or 3 months in Thailand. It is the most valuable money I can spend because what $100,000 buys me is time with people who know that people are more important than money. And boy, is that healing. And boy, is that rare in the United States. You offer an American $100,000 or quality time, seeing and being seen. You show me the American that will fork over the $100,000 for something intelligent, like knowing and being known. And that's not an American. What do you mean an American would do that? You show me the American who will jump for a $100 bill, doing all kinds of inane things on reality shows, on this and that and the other. They're all over the place. Because why would you expect an American to value themselves over money when they've gotten 10,000 messages from birth that say they're not valuable? Money is. Why weren't their parents spending time with them? Oh, it was for money. Why was your parents in such a bad mood? Well, they lost money. Why are we being treated like shit and shamed at school? Oh, we lost the house because we didn't have money. Why is no one babysitting my sister? We can't afford it because we don't have money. Money is this bullshitty thing that's elevated beyond people. No one pulls this bullshit in Thailand. Their families hold together. They take care of their elderly without government programs. They don't have a program for the homeless because they don't have homeless. They just erect a tiny hut and they have a home. And nobody stops them. Oh my goodness, we can't let you move into a bamboo hut. It doesn't meet health and safety regulations. Go and be homeless instead. No, there's none of that bullshit. They don't stop them from living in their homes, and then they don't rescue them when they're on the street and talk about the homeless problem. They're too smart. So the message of violence, violation, and abuse. In our cult, the parent, the government, the bully, the boss, the older brother, the power structure, the priest, as a cult pattern, utilizes some of that power to dominate, to violate, to shame, humiliate, and silence the cries of the victim. 5% of Catholic priests are estimated to be pedophiles, and it was all covered up by the Vatican. What percentage of our government is corrupt? Where a country is sold out for money, reminding us that you don't matter, money matters. This entire protocol is one of diminishing the felt sense of dignity and value for the feminine self in men and women. The being. The part that is valuable because I am human and because I am and because I have feelings and because I'm aware. Because I'm aware of being raped. That's why it's worth not raping me, even though it's expedient to save you a little dinner money and getting to know me. And it's not really worth that, is it? You're just here to be used, to be abused, to be exploited for money, for sex, for image, for reputation, for convenience, for making me look good. If I can't use you for some end, as a sociopath in a sociopathic state, in a sociopathic cult, I have no use for you. The parent that flips from anxiously hoping the child will make them look good to disgust and scorn of the child because the child made the parent look bad. And that was all the child was good for, was to make them look good, and they weren't even good enough to do that. You're useless because I can't use you. This is in far too many of our homes, in thought, if not in words, an outright violation. You get into the modern dating world after all of this, which is something I've thankfully escaped. I could write 100 letters to 100 women. One or two might write back some off-the-wall question like, do you like the Bears football team? I mean, you write 3 or 4. It's like, how much can I communicate to you via online dating, etc., that you're an afterthought in between my addictions of busyness and compulsion and pornography? How much can I communicate that I don't really have time? I know you're not worth it, but I'll put in just a little sentence. And if you pursue me, like if you want to waste your time writing another one-page letter, I might give you 2 sentences or 5 sentences. And if you show me that, what is it exactly? What is it? Oh, they're all losers. There's this incredible protocol of diminishment as opposed to magnificence in this game of courting and being courted, and the magic and energy, all that possibility. You see, when you're in an abuse cult, you expect to be abused. When you expect to be abused, people lose most of their value. They have negative value. And this diminishes. It sends a message of diminishment to everything decent and good within everyone in that cult, within that situation. And along with many, many other things, this makes us feel very, very small as human beings, as human feelings, as human beings, as presences, as spirits, whatever it is, that sense and essence of connection. It makes that feel small, unwanted, a burden, insignificant, humiliated, undervalued, diminished. Now, if you buy into the idea that you're worthless and a burden, etc., you're not going to invest in yourself and grow and become a great presence. So it's self-fulfilling. If you believe the lies of an abuse cult, you will feel that you're a piece of shit, so why would you develop yourself? And you don't develop yourself. And then people say, see, that's why I don't honor you, because you're not developed. You're caught in a catch-22 there. But this diminishment, this feeling of being incredibly small, and everything feeling very big and overwhelming and very heavy. Life becomes heavy. Responsibilities are heavy. Making a mistake is like there's so little love, there's so little caring, there's so little love and belonging and safety that every mistake becomes this huge deal. And what if it leads to this and this, and I'm homeless and I'm on the street and all this. And it's a terrifying burden. The smaller we feel, the bigger the world seems. The bigger the world seems, the more we regress, feel powerless and unimportant, which equals expanded fear and expanded hate, expanded trauma, expanded abuse, survival, coping mechanisms, and in this environment that is incredibly toxic, we seek counterbalance to this very smallness. Now, addiction is a counterbalance because it has with it a grandiosity, a boundlessness. So we feel incredibly small and helpless and invisible. So we want to feel grandiose. So we go shopping as if there's no tomorrow. And for a brief moment, we feel life and aliveness, and then we feel the smallness again of how am I going to pay off this debt? So addiction is one of the ways that we seek to respond to this sense of diminishment. Another is transferring diminishment back and forth. And here we get into those most petty of games where we try and climb the cult ranking system, whatever it's set out to be. So it's cool, right? So I don't have feelings, and I'm really busy because that's cool, right? So could someone comes to stop by your desk and you say, email that to me. I don't have time right now, and you sit there with your feet up and in the desk and stuff just to make sure that they feel small. So we play these petty games back and forth, and it's such a zero-sum game because anyone playing such a petty game by definition feels diminished. That's why they're playing the game. They're trying to pass off a lifetime of inadequacy and diminishment, which has nothing to do with you. It has to do with this entire abuse cult protocol. They're trying to pass that all off as you're unimportant. And then so you've got to give it back to them. Because they'll let you play the game whatever, come on over whenever. You're too unimportant to schedule a time for. And then I'm busy right now. Just sit there and wait for me as I talk on the phone for 3 hours about my important business dealings, and I'll get to you. And if you go through that, you'll end up feeling more and more diminished, and they will treat you worse and worse to see how far they can push, because the whole game of a highly diminished, shame-based person is to see how much of that shame they can give on to someone who will take it so that they don't have to carry it. And so there's this whole pettiness and all that, the games around that, which is incredibly small for everyone concerned. And so that's, one thing. Now, you might try and fight this with grandiosity. It's a reasonable counterbalance. You're made to feel so small you can't even breathe, and then you try being expansive and grandiose. And so this is the counterpoint. I feel so small, I've got to be grandiose. And it's a very fragile grandiosity, because if anyone knocks you, or you drive by in your Lamborghini or whatever it is that you're trying to compensate all the smallness, and someone thinks you're a dick, whatever, then suddenly you feel even worse, and embarrassed that you had to get a Lamborghini to feel important and all this. So we attack people who are grandiose. Now, I used to do a thing called boasting to kind of medicate some of this loneliness. And because boasting is attacked, we make people feel like shit, and then when they try and frantically tell something good about themselves so that they don't feel like shit, then we say, oh, now you're shit because you're boasting. So we're going to give you an infection called diminishment and insignificance and smallness. And then if you do anything about that, we're going to make you feel more diminished because you did something about it. We're just going to keep at that until you feel completely worthless and like shit and want to die, and just shut up and work like everyone else. And so let's drive that. And I noticed that people resented my boasting immensely. They thought they were superior. They thought it was untasteful. And I said, what exactly is the issue? I said this to myself, because you can't talk with people in a superiority cult because they're too superior to discuss why they're superior. So you won't usually get a straight answer. If you say, why exactly do you complain about boasting? You can boast. You spend all this time criticizing things. Why not spend some time praising something or boasting? And it was incredibly medicinal to boast. But I found that because of this diminishment cult, if I boasted first, the other person would resent it and presume that I was trying to diminish them. In other words, by the time anyone has gone through this abuse cult, they are certain that anyone trying to climb is actually trying to knock them down. That's the only way out of the crab trap, is to knock someone else in to get out. And so they try and pull you in so that they don't get left behind, and it's crabs pulling them, each other back in the box. And so I realized we had to negotiate and said, so I would say, let's boast. Let's praise ourselves because it's fun. You first. You take a turn, I'll take a turn. So they would very hesitantly, because they're used to being knocked down, say, well, say I'm a good cook. And I would say, hooray, you're a great cook. I love your cooking. Hooray for your great talent cooking. Now you can already feel the energy going up. It's terrific. Scientifically intelligent, makes you feel great, more motivated to cook, all of it. No harm done to anyone. They feel a little sheepish. Am I being set up for being diminished later? And then I do something. I'm a great conversationalist. And they kind of nod their head, and I say, no, celebrate it. Tell me what a great conversationalist I am. They don't really. You're a great conversationalist. They have to warm up. And so I said, come on, you next. And it's like, I don't have anything. Bullshit. What about your clothes? You wear clothes every day. What a guy. Hooray. You put on clothes. And you'd think this is a trap or whatever. There's so much things that we do right in this world. 99% of the time. We breathe the right number of times. We drink and keep our bodies alive. We avoid 10,000 cars on the freeway. We brush our teeth. We speak the English language relatively coherently. We read. We're doing all kinds of things right all the time. We knew the right button to press to turn on the TV. Hooray! And this energy is blocked, even though it's very important to balance out this amount of diminishment. And so after a little bit of coaxing, I could get a friend. This would be the best part of the whole interaction, would be building each other up. I appreciate you for this. You appreciate me for that. I appreciate myself for this. You appreciate yourself for that. I boast about this, and I celebrate your boasting. This is a lifting up, and it's obviously far healthier than addiction. It's far healthier than shame. It's far healthier than believing the lie that the human beings who create money and create cult and culture are less valuable than the cult, are to be sacrificed on the altar of culture and cult memes for no good reason other than that the cult is afraid of change and examining itself. If we understand the various forces that have given us 100,000 messages of diminishment in all of these domains, we will understand why we're diminished. If we understand that the more diminished we are and we feel, the bigger our problems, our crises, and our traumas feel by comparison, we will understand why we feel terrified in fight, flight, and fear in relationship to traumas and many facets of our life. And if we understand that that is not serving anyone or anything, we can begin to give the shame and the inadequacy of the memes that are used to diminish us and maintain us in a chronically diminished state back to the cult that gave them to us. And understand that they are not personal. The fact that you're in a cult that values busyness over presence and rich human interactions has nothing to do with you. you're in a fucked up cult. The fact that education consists of learning a large number of topics you're never going to use in your entire life and ignoring the most vital aspects of meaning, of purpose, of happiness, and well-being has nothing to do with you. You're in a fucked up cult. It's not your fault. And the fact that you feel small because you didn't get good grades in these ridiculous topics, more power to you. Perhaps some part of you knew how dumb they were. And if you've got your value only because you've got a better score in fractions or algebra or one-sided history, heaven help you. But that's not your fault either. If that was the only way to get some attention and love was to, study these things, that often have little connection with daily life. The fact that your cult shames you based on the amount and values you based on skin color, money, and age, and not on interpersonal relational skills, the ability to generate human well-being, the ability to live a sustainable lifestyle, and many other metrics that are 100 times more intelligent, is because you're part of a stupid cult. That's not your fault. It's not your cult. You would have identified with anything you'd been born into because that's how children adapt. And you're stuck with this bullshit. I sincerely hope, and of course the therapeutic dynamic in some of this is very diminishing. First of all, you're taught that if you need help, you're weak because you're feminine, and females are weak and shameful. So, if you do need help, well, that's shameful. But then you're supposed to go to a therapist and talk about your feelings that are feminine and thus shameful, in a chauvinistic cult. And it's so much of a burden in many ways for the therapist to have to sit there and listen to your feelings that they're going to charge you hundreds of dollars, because that's what a problem your feelings are. Hundreds of dollars just to listen to your feelings. Now, of course, if you were a valuable human being, there'd be people lining up to listen to your feelings for free. Because feelings are the doorway to the soul. They're the doorway to intimacy. They're the start of a romantic relationship. They're the start of every fun that's ever happened. Feelings. They're the start of it all. And so people would line up right and left to enjoy, learn about, support, bless, play with, understand, empathize with your feelings. Not in an abuse cult filled with chauvinism. You've got to drive at a set time, and heaven forbid you keep the therapist waiting, and pay hundreds of dollars an hour to find one person who will tolerate your feelings, not share them, not say, oh, how wonderful, and oh, interesting, and this and that, and let's do this in our free time as well. No. Do you feel anything over there as I cry my heart out? You've got a sociopath with a notepad putting up with feelings. Now, this is exaggerated in some cases to make a point. It is a diminishing experience to go to a therapist on their schedule at their location to turn on your feelings and then turn them off again 50 minutes later and pay them hundreds of dollars. And if it doesn't work, meaning plenty of people do this kind of thing and feel numb or nothing or don't see any improvements. If it doesn't work, it's because you did it wrong. It's not because the therapist was incompetent, as evidenced by the fact that you don't get a refund. In every other business, other than feelings, which are feminine, in every other business, if you give a laptop to someone and they fuck it up, they have to repair it, give you a refund, give you a new laptop. Not therapists. They're dealing with feelings. Heaven help us. And so when they fuck up or don't do anything good, they just say, well, if you'd like to talk about how we fucked up, you can come back again next week and pay me hundreds of dollars to do so. And that's all part of the therapeutic process. I'm more than happy to hold space for your anger at me that you don't feel I'm doing good enough therapy for you. That's all part of the process. Hand over the next few $100s. So, how do you feel? Diminished? Treated well? Like your emotional breakthroughs are important? And even the level of research and development. Your apps will be updating every month or so, new features here. Your therapist is as dreary as they were 10 years ago. Learning new paradigms, trying out a new style, getting a new pen for their notebook? Heaven forbid. No. They just show up drearily year after year, doing the same old crap. Why? Because apps have to be updated as addictive distractions that are in this frenzied loop to protect us from feelings. But therapy, good old Freud, 100 years old. Let's just do that. Let's not do any updates. Let's not generate data about which types of therapies work better than others. Let's just keep this very subjective. Everyone has their own approach. I do mine, whether it works or not, and you have to pay for it. So this is a diminishing phenomena. This diminishment dramatically escalates the amount of things that we perceive as frightening, which weakens the sense of confidence in the self, etc., makes traumas more difficult to face, perpetuates PTSD, and it's good to know. The reason I point all this out is because this cult will never own one iota of this and never apologize to you. Never. Ruined your life? Go fuck yourself. Made you depressed, lonely, and miserable? Cult could give a shit. You think it's going to change? Because you matter? Forget it. Forget it. It makes us feel small. And I am sorry. I'm sorry that you're part of this cult. I'm sorry for all the ways that this cult made you feel small. I'm sorry that this cult made all the people around you feel very, very small in various ways at various times, and that they passed that smallness onto you. Every human state is infectious, is viral in nature. This makes perfect sense and has been repeatedly shown in studies, though, of course, we've done very few studies because that would mean you mattered. We'll study click rates. What makes someone click more on clickbait? We'll do maybe $1 billion of studies on that in 1 year. But we will not study what makes you feel small and what makes you feel big, because that would actually mean that you mattered. And I apologize. I'm sorry that you and the people around you have been treated to such dehumanizing smallness and indignity that passing the message back, you are worthless, I'm worthless, you are worthless, we are worthless, it's pointless, we're tired, we're not, that passing that message back has become so normal that many of us are numb to the pain. That's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's what abuse cults do. And when we understand the source of that smallness and give it back, we will feel expanded, more valuable. You are valuable. You have a tremendous amount of possibility that is linked deeply to the environment around you. And there are some choices that you can make that lead to less diminishment. I woke up this morning feeling incredibly heavy and small. That's why I'm making this video today. It's very easy to focus on ourselves, to become self-absorbed when we find ourselves bearing a cult virus that has little or nothing to do with us. I found myself feeling very small. Difficult breathing, difficult feeling it all. And my wife asked me how I was feeling. And I felt diminished because it took too much energy at that moment to put it into words. It felt tiring. So I said, don't ask me right now. It's too hard to put into words. Ask me instead how I can feel loved and supported. So she said, Dane, how can I help you feel loved and supported? And I said, make me some mangosteen. It's a tropical Thai fruit. Make me some mangosteen. Make me a pot of jasmine, Earl Grey jasmine, or is it? No, it's a jasmine black tea. Jasmine black tea. Make me a pot of jasmine black tea. Fill me a cup of soda water and squeeze 2 lemons in it. Make me a beautiful card with a poem in it. Massage my neck that feels so heavy. And I will sit outside and smoke a cigar. She said, okay. Immediately, I felt lifted. I'm not alone. Someone's there with me. Someone's carrying the load of some of my diminishment. They're medicating it. She's medicating the load by making me the center of attention, honoring my preferences, loving me, asking me what she can do, and doing it. Before I knew, I had a beautiful card, the beautiful poem. Delicious mangosteen. Then she sat beside me, eating her own breakfast. And I felt wonderful. I felt wonderful. And I paused my breakfast and made the notes for this video. And it feels quite doable. Sometimes we need a little bit of help. We need one human being in our life to say, how can we love and support you? You're worth it. I want to lift some of this weight off you that says you're worth nothing, you're inadequate, you're alone. I want you to know that I'm here with you. Far from helping with this issue, modern-day feminism has taken the decades and centuries of diminishment of the female sex and started throwing it back in the male's face, often with a certain kind of scorekeeping that says, if we can make you feel even more diminished than we felt before, that's progress for us. It isn't actually. You don't get flow without a balance of masculine and feminine energy, regardless of gender. You don't get communication without a talker and a listener, a giver and a receiver. Doesn't matter what role you play, you've got to engage to have flow, to have value. And on top of all these various things, having someone out to prove how much you don't matter is not particularly helpful. And I've married a Filipina, a delightful Filipina woman, who I adore and who I have found incredibly easy to love in a technical sense. Meaning, if I say, what can I do to make you very happy today? She'll work with me and she'll be very, very happy. And how can we connect in this way and this way? We do. And we put our relationship first, ahead of work, which is another aspect of diminishment. 78% of Americans hate their job. I know what we'll do. Let's make them spend most of their time doing the thing they hate and commuting to it, which they hate even more. And so this is kind of absurd. And so we're in Thailand at the moment around people that put people first. And we put our relationship first. When she got her job, she made it clear to her contractor, to her clients, that she would be taking long vacations with her husband as we felt like it. And if they didn't want to support our relationship, she wasn't going to work there. And I do the same thing. You know, as I say, I forgo a lot of money as a business owner to put being around human beings first. And then, of course, honoring things like this helps. When we can give back to the culture the abusive messages that have come towards us, it's not as personal. It's not as personal. And we can actually play a valuable role in changing the cult, one person at a time, starting with us, where we matter, our feelings matter. And let's see how much we can create a world around that message. You're valuable. You're valuable. How do people that both know they're valuable interact? You see, it's not with self-importance. That's the compensation to a deep belief in diminishment. It's not with going and buying absurd things you don't need, which is how our cult answers. Because this is basically what our cult says. Okay, we understand you are a piece of shit and we've made you feel like a piece of shit. Now here's the solution. If you will work really, really hard at a job that you hate, you can buy things that will make you important, because we will spend billions of dollars convincing everyone that anyone who has this product is an important person. And then you can save up your money from that job you don't like to buy this thing that you don't need, but that will assure you that you are important. And when that feels a bit hollow, we'll have a new product handy. And in this way, we can expand the material consumption per capita of every American to 100,000 times more units of natural resources per capita than our Native American ancestors or any cult in human history. And it'll be an endless fuel, not for you, for the economy. Because within a capitalist cult, you don't matter, the economy matters. You've got to suffer and lose your job so that capitalists can make more money overseas. The economy matters. And this is a joke. This is consumerism. America's answer to the endless diminishment is endless addictive consumerism. It's bad for the planet, it's bad for your health, it's destructive to your psyche, and it gives no lasting relief. The only answer is to get in touch and honor the feelings, the felt state, and the personal values we create by learning to think intelligently about how we can create the most well-being for our masculine and feminine side in partnership with the choices and the resources available to us. And the happiness data says relationships and daily habits, an extra hour of sleep, quality relationships, a gratitude diary, doing things that bring you joy and pleasure, deep, spontaneous quality time with people that bring out the best in you, and screw the rest. After survival, income will determine less than 10%. After you've got your health care, your survival, your security of survival, you can meet your needs, etc. Take more time. Create a rich and quality life. Do things you enjoy, and you won't be so anxious to retire and quickly die with nothing to do out of boredom. You're valuable for your entire life. You can keep learning until the end. You can be an elder that your culture desperately needs but is too dumb to honor. A few people may discover your wisdom. And I appreciate your time.